Welcome to Kansas Ag Report. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's show, we get a ag update financially with Courtney Kelly, who is an economist with the Kansas City Federal Reserve based in the Oklahoma City branch. We'll also have updates from the Kansas Soybean Commission, Kansas Department of Agriculture, and Kansas Grain Sorghum, and also the weekly information from the Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, kfb.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
In agriculture information, the Department of Agriculture issued the latest monthly World Ag Supply and Demand Report. The month's corn outlook for fractionally higher supplies and ending stocks. Corn production forecast up 55 million bushels as greater planted and harvested area from the June 30th number. It's partially offset by a 4 bushel reduction in yield to 177.5 bushels per acre. The season average farm price unchanged, $4.80 a bushel. Soybean and oilseed production projected 127.6 million tons, down 5.6 million from last month. Harvested area forecast 83.5 million acres. From that June 30th report, down 4 million from last month. The season average soybean price forecast $12.40 a bushel. That's up 30%, 30 cents that is, from last month. Changes this month in the wheat outlook, increased supplies as well as domestic use. They're leaving those exports unchanged. Increase ending stocks. The projected season average farm price, $7.50 a bushel. That's down 20 cents from last month. Well, total farm tractor unit sales in the U.S. turned positive for the first time this year, led by continued strength in those large tractors and combines. The Association of Equipment Manufacturers reports gains in the U.S. market were led in those 100-plus horsepower two-wheel drive units, up 25.4%, closely followed by the four-wheel drive units, up 21.9%. But a change from the previous month is the small gain in the sub-40 horsepower two-wheel drive segment, up 0.2%. Now, that took overall sales positive since they represent more than 66% of total unit sales volume for the month. U.S. combines also marked another large gain of 9.8%. And at the mid-year mark, year-to-date sales units for farm tractors down 9.7%, despite a gain in 45.5% in those four-wheel drive tractors over the same period. Combines up 51.5%. And a group of farm state senators introducing USDA Spending Accountability Act. This bill introduced by Roger Marshall of Kansas, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, and Mike Braun of Indiana. The legislation would limit the dispersal of funds through USDA's financing institution, we know it as a Commodity Credit Corporation. They would be permitted to use that only when authorized by Congress. The Secretary of Agriculture has broad discretionary authority in spending the excess CCC funds. This includes reimbursing farmers due to the losses of funding and so on in multinational corporations, those where many of the money goes. Recent instances of discretionary spending abuse prompted some bipartisan concern as the programs were enacted without any input from Congress, allow USDA to act not only as the authorizer, but as well as the appropriator. And by removing the discretionary authority, the Congressional Budget Office says the USDA Spending Accountability Act would save $8 billion over 10 years. This substantial savings created the bill, they say, would assist Congress in its goal to find more money for the Farm Bill. We'll have more in a moment.
The Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
And joining us is Courtney Kelly, who is a senior economist in the Regional Affairs Department for the Kansas City Federal Reserve. We're going to talk about this ag economy. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Ken. Good to see you.
Great to catch up with you again. We're going to talk about a report that just came out and the latest ag update on this second quarter. Give us that overall kind of 3,000 foot mark of where we are with this ag economy right now.
Sure. So the agricultural economy seems to be still pretty stable. What we're seeing in ag finance conditions is obviously the big story is higher interest rates. Interest rates have gone up across all types of loans, non-real estate and real estate. And alongside that, we're seeing loan volumes starting to decline. So loan volumes declined for the second consecutive quarter. So the recent report that we put out this week covers our national survey of terms of lending to farmers. So it's national data on new agricultural loans that are originated within the quarter. And so we are starting to see some pullback in loan demand. At the same time, I think, the question is what's driving that? Well, we are starting to see some declines in input costs. So the cost of fuel and fertilizer have come down from really historic highs that we've seen in recent years. So lower production costs, and then also still pretty strong liquidity and cash in the ag sector. And one way that we know that too is that we're still seeing farmland values increase, even despite higher interest rates. Farmland values are increasing at a slower pace, yes, but are still increasing. So we think that's a sign that conditions are still pretty strong in the sector. I think we've seen some downward pressure on prices over the last month, particularly for corn. We've gotten a couple of bearish WASDE reports here recently. And so including this week, we saw some pullback in prices for wheat and corn in the markets. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of where that goes. The wheat crop in Kansas and Oklahoma is about to wrap up harvest, but in the northern part of the state and Kansas, pretty behind on the wheat crop. We've had really wet weather. And so I know on my small farm here, it's been a while since I've been able to go out to the barn without rubber boots on. And so, which is a very different situation than where we were last summer. So weather and interest rates, I think, are the two most important factors right now for the ag economy.
We're talking with Courtney Kelly from the Kansas City Federal Reserve about kind of the latest ag outlook update that has been out there. We're going to take a break and continue our conversation in just a moment.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
And our guest is Courtney Kelly with the Kansas City Federal Reserve. She is a senior economist in the Regional Affairs Department. And Courtney, as we look at what's going on, let's talk about the strength of banks. And we saw a report out from the Economic Research Service that said, the challenge for the bigger farmers isn't quite so much as what these smaller farmers are, but piece all that together of the strength of lending opportunities for banks and just the strength they've had in going through some of maybe the challenges we've seen, especially here in the Great Plains and High Plains.
Yeah, I think that it has been challenging with kind of major swings in interest rates. That always creates challenges, and with the volatility we've seen in markets, kind of starting with the pandemic and then the war in Ukraine, and then now that's created just at the very least a lot of uncertainty for agricultural producers and also agricultural bankers. From what we're seeing, though, agricultural banks have still been very well positioned. Net interest margins have improved. One of the things that got the ag banks through the pandemic, they did pretty well with servicing farmers, even with the Paycheck Protection Program and generating revenues from that. I think that the main thing the main difficulty we're seeing now is we are starting to see loan demand start to fall off. On the other side of bank liquidity is deposits, and I think that's also been one difficulty as well. With higher inflation, people are spending more money and maybe not depositing as much. So we have started to see some weakness on the core deposit, kind of that core funding side for banks. And so that's something that we're monitoring very closely. But as of right now, agricultural banks, funding is still very strong, still very much able to lend to producers that need that financing. And so not too concerned right now, but definitely monitoring it very closely.
Well, before long, a lot of producers will be going to their local banks and or Farm Credit or whatever to talk about operating loans. And are we going to see interest rates higher, lower, about the same? I mean, again, not to put words in your mouth, but it seems to be kind of rolling up and down and deciding on what position banks need to be, because we look at where we were a year ago to where we are now. It's a bit of a reprieve, but still not what we were used to, say, pre-pandemic.
Right. And I think that, anytime a question about the future path of interest rates, obviously I don't have any control over that, but I can direct people to what we call the dot plot. So if you just Google the FOMC dot plot, that gives a pretty good indication of at least a range of where FOMC participants are. And I think that they do communicate that pretty clearly, what they think might happen toward the end of the year, maybe another couple of rate increases, because we still, even though we did get a really good CPI inflation report this week that did show inflation for consumers slowing, and a big part of that was on the food and energy side. Energy, though, in particular, can be extremely volatile. So even though we've seen some lowering of inflation, most of that has been on the good side of the economy, and we're still seeing a lot of inflationary pressure on the services side. And so I think that there's still some desire and to continue to try to get inflation back to the target of an average of 2%. And so according to that dot plot that I mentioned, we could still see rates go a little higher, but in the longer term, the dot plot would show the expectation that interest rates could start to come back down at least by 2025 is what that shows.
All right, Courtney. Well, we appreciate the update on what's going on, and we look forward to continuing this conversation as we go throughout the year. So appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Courtney Kelly, who is the Senior Economist, Regional Affairs Department with the Kansas State Federal Reserve, has joined us. We'll have more coming up in just a moment.
Imagine having someone help you pick the best corn hybrids for every field on your farm. Your Oldie representative can combine your data with his data to offer a field-by-field prescription. Contact Oldie Seed today at 877-692-4555.
The producer-funded Kansas Wheat Innovation Center was built to get improved varieties into the hands of farmers faster. Kansas Wheat, farmers advancing their future through wheat genetics research.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the Soybean Checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the Soybean Checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
You grow the soybeans, you harvest the soybeans, and you transport the soybeans. These protein-rich soybeans are comprised of 80% soybean meal, which is used primarily in livestock feed, and 20% soybean oil. Soybean oil has played a vital part in the transportation industry as it is a major feedstock for biodiesel. Biodiesel can power trucks, farm equipment, and airplanes. This has a direct benefit to U.S. soybean farmers as soybeans are essential to the production of biodiesel, which adds 63 cents to the price of a bushel of soybeans. Today, more people continue to blend increasing quantities of biodiesel into petroleum diesel, which has reduced costs for users and decreased emissions. Soybean oil can also be used to make crayons. In fact, 1 acre of soybeans can produce 82,368 crayons. Soybean products are more common than you might think. With the production, soybean meal, and oil, soybeans have extensive uses. Some of the common uses of soybean oil include cooking oil, salad dressing, paint, and makeup products. Soybean meal can be found in most livestock feed, pet food, and in aquaculture feed. These soybeans provide a great protein supplement in animal feed and can improve metabolism. Soybean meal is incredibly beneficial for aquaculture as it is easily digestible for them. Soy protein has also proven to reduce cancer risk. The isoflavones that is found in soy has shown to reduce tumor cell proliferation and induce tumor cell death. The Soybean Checkoff has worked with Goodyear Tire to develop a new line of soy-based tires. The Goodyear Assurance Weather Ready tires focuses on a more sustainable tire that provides improved traction in rain and snow. This line of tire uses U.S. soybean oil, which has proven to be more sustainable by reducing petrochemicals. The opportunities are endless. Soybeans will fuel the nation by providing feed, food, and fuel for generations to come.
What does a brighter, more sustainable future look like in our cities and towns, and how do we get there? When New York needed an alternative fuel source to reduce carbon emissions, the city found what it needed in biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
The vision of the Kansas Department of Agriculture is that Kansas will be an ideal environment for long-term sustainable agricultural prosperity and statewide economic growth. One of the ways we work toward that vision is by seeking federal grant funds that can be directed to Kansas farmers, ranchers, and agribusinesses. Through the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program and the Organic Certification Cost Share Program, we've been able to distribute hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to Kansas farmers for projects that promote economic development, education, sustainability, and organic production. Last year, KDA was awarded a $2.5 million cooperative agreement under the USDA's Local Food Purchase Assistance Program to purchase and distribute Kansas-grown and processed foods to underserved communities and families across Kansas through the state's existing distribution network of food banks. Local farmers and producers applied to participate so they could sell their produce, dairy, meat, eggs, and more to Kansas food banks. This summer, KDA has received new funds to extend this program and continue connecting underserved Kansans with Kansas-grown food. And a few weeks ago, we announced that KDA was awarded a new $6.5 million cooperative agreement through the USDA's Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure Program to build resilience across the middle of the food supply chain and strengthen local and regional food systems. KDA is currently developing the criteria which will guide the process to subaward these funds to Kansas food and farm businesses. These are a few of the ways that KDA can take full advantage of the grant programs offered through the USDA and maximize the opportunities to bring those funds to Kansas. For more information about grant programs at KDA, go to our website, agriculture.ks.gov/grants.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and Liberty Link that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
Maddie Meyer, Director of Programs for Kansas Grain Sorghum here, bringing you the latest updates on the sorghum industry in Kansas. As we enter the month of July, the latest USDA reports that 87% of Kansas sorghum acres have been planted, behind 2022's 94% and 95% national average. Drought, of course, remains a factor for many Kansas farmers. Areas in central and southwest Kansas have seen improvements, including portions of McPherson, Ellsworth, Ness, and Morton counties, while eastern portions of the state continue to become a little bit more dry. Did you know that July 1st marked the 15th anniversary of the Sorghum Checkoff? From raising awareness of the crop across a multitude of applications, expanding markets, and conducting innovative research efforts, the Sorghum Checkoff has assisted in the continuous growth of the sorghum industry since 2008. We would like to recognize at this time the 13 original board members who made this all possible, 5 of whom were Kansans. To current, past, and future board members, thank you for all you do for our industry. Sorghum U, Wheat U will be here before we know it. This year's event will be held August 9th, 2023 at the Doubletree Hilton Hotel in Wichita and will feature a great lineup of speakers. This year's Farmer Leader panel will feature Kansas Grain Sorghum's very own Association President Kent Winter and Kansas Grain Sorghum Commissioner Brant Peterson. Be sure to RSVP in advance at the High Plains Journal's website to make sure you ensure your free lunch ticket. Thank you and stay tuned for next time.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has published a final rule in the Federal Register that will roll back more of the Endangered Species Act improvements achieved under the previous administration. The rule removes language that restricts the introduction of experimental populations under Section 10J of the Act to the species historical range. Previously, the Fish and Wildlife Service was only permitted to release an experimental population of a listed species into geographic areas outside the species' historic range after its primary habitat had been unsuitably and irreversibly altered or destroyed. The new rule removes that requirement, allowing the agency to introduce a 10J population of any threatened or endangered species in any area they choose. The Fish and Wildlife Service did incorporate language into the rule recommended by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association that would require the agency to consider any possible adverse effects to the ecosystem that could result from this haphazard and unscientific introduction of such populations. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association will be monitoring the impacts this rule has on voluntary conservation efforts, watching specifically for the introduction of any new 10J predator populations.
More farmers and ranchers than ever have chosen to be BQA certified.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com. Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Good morning. This is Jake McCall with Pinion Ag. We are steadily making our way into the summer growing season after a very rapid spring planting pace. Now that the majority of the crop is in the ground, all eyes will be on the weather forecast to determine this year's crop, and the market will be watching. So far, there's still a lot of ground with less moisture than would be ideal, especially in western Kansas and Nebraska. However, some relief has been found in scattered showers over the past few weeks that will attempt to replenish soil moisture where it can. Grains rallied across the board last week going into Memorial Day weekend, but from there it will largely be a weather market as we see that the U.S. is continually priced over the world market, a phenomenon demonstrated continually by poor export numbers. Cattle markets continue to march higher as we've seen an unseasonably strong cash trade for fat steers. With a large spread between northern and southern cash prices, it is likely that cattle will be trucked from south to north to fill this opportunity. In other spaces, all markets are still watching to see how the debt ceiling will be handled in D.C. While it is more than likely a deal will be reached, it is always a subject that unnerves Wall Street investors. If you have any questions or would like to discuss your marketing strategies, feel free to reach out at 888-452-8751. I'm Jake McCall with Pinion Ag, and I hope you have a safe and productive day.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
Rural families are built different. You deal with the highs and lows of rural living. You support your family, your church, and your community. You often work sun up to sun down, and you do these things because you love it. But life isn't always easy.
Sometimes as farmers or ranchers, you're supposed to be this big tough person, you know, like I've got this ground, I've got these cattle, you're not supposed to struggle. Everybody's struggling. And sometimes it's just having that conversation with a friend for them to soften a little bit, to be able to have an open conversation.
There is help for anyone struggling with mental health. Text or call 988 to be connected to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Talk to someone. Above all, don't suffer in silence. For more resources, visit kfb.org/Rural Minds Matter.
That's our show this week. Be social with us online, kansasagreport.net, or our social media channels. I'm Ken Rogers. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on the Kansas Ag Report.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.